You're good.
We're good?
So I talked to Cheryl.
Doubling down on that spear.
Hello, everybody. I am the project lead for Stained Glass Studios. I have Kenny Diaz, the design lead for Stained Glass Studios. Everyone say hi, Kenny.
Hi, Kenny.
Hi, everyone.
And welcome to Splinter's Vertical Slice. We are so excited to present what we've been working so hard to show you. We have a lot of really good stuff to show you, a really good demo to show off. And without further ado, let's kick it off. But first, I would like to thank my Splinters for their work up until now. I love you guys so much, and I'm so proud of you. This presentation is for you just as much as it is for everybody else. So can we please give Stained Glass Studios a round of applause for their work. Also, as you see, Splinter is here. He will be joining us occasionally every now and again throughout the presentation. All right, let's get it started. First, for those unaware, let's go over what exactly Splinter is. Splinter is a combat action game taking place inside of a large and mystical creature named Cathedrus. Splinter has several different weapons, and that allows the player to weave weapon-driven abilities together to navigate this living and vast environment. With that, this game is a combat-first experience, so we have enemy designs as well that push player adaptation to what they impose upon the player. Now, what is this environment? Let's talk about what Cathedrus is. Cathedrus, like I explained before, is a large and magical creature comprised of both flesh and bone and sinew, that with black stone cathedrals and Gothic architecture. He is a part of a species called the Vastamors, large creatures of similar makeup that roam the world consuming different buildings for energy. Cathedrus is the largest one, the largest and the oldest, and he wishes to die because he has lived long past his lifespan up until this point because of a group known as the Family of Ash. The Family of Ash is a group of cultists with their origins are unknown. It is thought that they have been swept up into Cathedrus at some point in the past and have survived being consumed and have now grown their own community within Cathedrus. They now power Cathedrus from within, keeping his lifespan longer past his natural course, believing that Cathedrus is carrying them as a holy vehicle to Nirvana. In response, Cathedrus needs to rid the Family of Ash out of his body to finally be rid of them and lay himself to rest once and for all. To do that, he creates you, the player, Splinter. Splinter is a portioned off piece of Cathedrus' soul, with the sole task of reaching Cathedrus' hearth, his heart and soul, snuffing it out and allowing him to rest once and for all. To do this, the player must cut through the several groups of cultists throughout Cathedrus' body, eliminating the pyres they have set up, keeping his hearth ablaze. Now let's get into the different targets we asked and said that we were going to give for today's vertical slice. Based on last status update, we promised these following items. We're happy to say that we followed up on this promise and delivered about 80% of what we wanted to achieve. There are some still VFX, but some of them are still being cooked, so they're not present inside of this vertical slice demo today. As well as there is not an intro present in this build, and the sanctum had to be reworked, our demo level, due to a cut of content that I'll detail later on. But we are still proud of the work that we did, and we think it's very impressive and that you'll enjoy it once we get there. Now, let's talk about Splinter's model. Currently, this is the model that is an engine. We refer to this model internally as Proto-Splinter. Proto-Splinter is currently in engine, fully rigged, and animated, and our metrics for this model is that total time taking in design, 3D modeling, texturing, and proxy break implementation took about 26 hours for this model to get in. Moving forward, let's talk about the actual sculpt, the eventual final model for Splinter. Here is the sculpt uncolored. Very nice. Now we have the base sculpt and a color blocked version as well. Thank you. You're catching on. So to get to this point, to sculpt this model took 21 hours. So to get to this point altogether, including using the prototype mesh as a base, took us around 47 hours to reach this point. He still has some work to be done with texturing and rigging, but based on our velocity with how fast he is getting done, he will be in engine very, very soon. Let's talk about the husk. Last time you saw the husk, he was only but a small sketch on a render board. Now, he is fully textured, unwrapped, and rendered. Ooh. So let's talk about his metrics. Altogether, to get to this point, it took us about 37 hours to get this nice, gross little guy into engine, unwrapped, rigged, and set up gameplay-wise. Let's talk about some environmental assets that we have. Within Splinter, we're going to be using a combination of both asset pack implementation and in-house assets. On the screen is a combination of both static meshes, decals, and texture work done by our art lead, Gabe. Here, we have about 43 assets, which took about 53 hours of time to create them, texture them, and import them into Engine. Let's talk about animation work. Our animations for Splinter are going to be a mix of asset pack implementation, hand keyframing, and mocap animations. Right now, we have about 30 animations currently in Engine that are totaling of these combinations. The ones we're seeing here are his base animation cycles, and we will see more of these animations during the demo. Let's talk about the different weapons in Splinter. Splinter will be consisting of 3 different weapons, each with their own combat options and traversal options, allowing the player to swap between them freely to adapt to their current situations. For the demo today, we have the Spear, the first one that the player will receive in the first level of the Sanctum. Now the Spear went through a pretty drastic rework since the last stats update. We no longer have a grapple hook attached to the Spear, and are now moving forward with a design that fits the game both aesthetically and closer to the design. Now, the core at the tip of the Spear now has explosive magical capabilities, allowing the player to use it to propel themselves vertically, horizontally, and propel enemies along with them. Here you see when you use it without a sprinting input. Without holding the right trigger, the player can press their special ability button, the top gamepad button, or Y in this instance, to send themselves vertically upward at a very fast velocity. This is executable both on the ground and airborne. In the example we can see the player using it airborne. It has strong vertical movement and can also carry enemies with them up into the air, which we will demonstrate during the demo portion. It also has various level interactions, where if you use it in certain spots of the level, it'll take you to predetermined locations, which we will also see during the demo portion. Now, this has a different behavior when the player is sprinting. Holding the right trigger, the player can now press the same button to do a different version of this ability that sends them more horizontally than vertically and slightly faster. As you can see, the player here is using it in the air to make a wider gap than before. This is still executable on both the ground and airborne, more horizontal movement, and enemies are still carried to the explosion, and they also are applied the more horizontal velocity. Let's talk about spear throwing. Holding down the left trigger will allow the player to charge up the core at the tip of the spear. Being able to now press the left face button, known as X in this context, to then throw it to be able to execute a magical explosion upon impact. This magical explosion is able to damage enemies and also has AoE explosion damage capabilities. It also has environment interactivity, where you can throw it at enemies, and with the intended implementation to be able to throw it at cracked pieces of architecture to blow it open and progress further. You can also use it to pop different sinew bubbles to progress throughout the level, which we will see during the demo portion. Now his combat moveset. Now we have a basic 3-hit combo that's executable on the ground, as well as also in the air. For right now, the combo is only executable upon the first attack making contact with an enemy. This is also executable while airborne, as I detailed, which we will see during the demo portion. I gotta keep some things during the demo. We need a little showmanship around here. Let's talk about the swap attack. The swap attack for the spear is a spinning form of attack that has strong knockback and 20 HP points of damage. Now, this weapon, because we have no other weapons, this attack can just be used and returned back to idle. But the implementation for this attack specifically is coming back into the spear. So imagine you're using the staff, you press the swap attack button, you select the spear. This is what would happen, and you return to idle with the spear in hand. Swap attacks promote the usage of other weapons by being able to seamlessly swap between them to take advantage of their different combat, interactivity, and environment capabilities. Now, let's talk about the level that we'll be detailing today. The Sanctum, also known as Cathedra's Stomach. This is the birthplace of Splinter. This is where Splinter will spawn at the beginning of the game, inside a piece of flesh that has been tucked away inside of an old cathedral, deep into the dark catacombs of the Sanctum. This level is about 75% complete, as some of it was being retooled as we began to flesh out more Splinter's character controller, while also retooling the different traversal capabilities of the spear. Now, the players will traverse through the stomach and eliminate several different pyres that the cultists have set up. Pyres are large combat arenas that, once you approach a pyre, a camera sequence will show you the location of it, and enemies will spawn. Once all enemies are eliminated, you are then able to eliminate the pyre and proceed forward. The first section of the Sanctum is our area for close arc target, as I detailed in our previous stats update from a month ago. These are some beauty shots of the arc target that I'll let cycle through. We wanted to emphasize that this is indeed inside of a creature, so we wanted to make it, with lack of a better term, wet and gross. Which I think we have delivered on quite nicely. In total, the amount of time we have taken up to get to the Sanctum to this point, both gameplay target and art target wise, has taken us 139 hours, just about. Let's talk about our custom shading model brought to us by Xiao Xiao. Now, we made a big point about this in one of our ASGs. We're one of the only teams building from source to make this work. So we're happy to show off that we have an early version of it working in Engine. While it is not a part of the demo we will be showing today, we wanted to demonstrate that yes, we are working on it, and yes, it is an engine and functioning, but it still needs a little more tooling. This is it with it off. This is it with it on. This is it side by side. This is it side by side from the other angle. And in case you really can't see the difference, this is it on two orbs. Thank you, Splinter, for pointing it out. So, with this, we have a ramp texture that allows different designers and artists to both tweak and directly manually control how these objects are being shaded and control the way the shadow is actually being casted, as you can see the difference between the two of them, even though they're being lit from the same light source. Let's talk about music and SFX. So brought to us by Matthew. Matthew has brought to us 93 assets in 93 hours. It's a pretty good velocity time. So, for I want to present today, one of our most treasured pieces of content is we have an updated main theme that I'd like to play for you all today. This has gone through several different iterations. We're very, very proud of it, and we hope you enjoy it. I also won't blow open the speakers. I'm not sick. Let's be honest. Now we have more SFX and another track within the demo that will be shown off when we get to that section, which we're at now. So before we demo, let's just lay the groundwork. We have our art target and gameplay target separated. So in the beginning, we will be walking through the art target, where it is the beginning birthplace of Splinter as he first takes his steps of life before he acquires his first weapon, the spear. The rest of the demo will be taking place in a short section of the gameplay target, where it is mostly blockout assets with gameplay in mind and first and foremost after the player receives the spear. Without further ado, let's get into the demo.
Hey guys, you get to watch me play video games.
It's not changed. It's not changed. No. Yeah. There, we're good. We're good.
Must be a gift from him. Oh, thank you, Cathedra's great shepherd flame. I hear your message. Yes, we will continue measuring you from within. I promise.
So what you just saw there is throughout the points of the levels within Splinter, there will be stained glass windows containing memories that Cathedras has condensed into glass and placed throughout his body. Splinter is unaware of these memories, so he'll be slowly reacquiring them with his portion of the soul when you approach them in gameplay. As you see, the one you just viewed was a snippet of Father Stone, the leader of the family of Ash, receiving her powers from Cathedras, believing that it is a gift, commanding him to keep him alive.
So gross. It's so awesome.
You can also pick up different heart fruits throughout his body, extending Splinter's HP bar. And here we have the Spear Room. Cathedras granting you Splinter's first act of aggression and violence, the Spear. And with that, we exit the art target and we enter the gameplay target. The Sanctum. Ooh. Uh-oh, our first enemy. He's scary. We do have quite a lot of knockback on the Spear.
So that right there was one of our zones where when you interact with our spirit box, it takes you to your pre-designated location. Oh, bye! Fully charged.
And now we approach the final part of the demo, the first pyre fight of the Sanctum. Now that all enemies are eliminated, Kenny can now approach the pyre and break it apart.
Yay!
And that will be the end of our demo for Splinter. Now, let's get into what we learned over the course of development of this demo. First, this is a term that I have coined. Kenny, can you build?
Oh, that's not so true, my bad.
You're good.
Sorry.
Thank you. All right. That's what I was saying. The first lesson that we learned is a term that I coined. I need to click into the... There we go. Game design, king of the hill. What I mean by this is deciding what aspect of this game is king. The environment, the traversal, or the combat. We were trying to juggle this for a lot of the time during development, and it wasn't really working out. So now we have learned that combat is king, and all other decisions will bend the knee to combat during development. Next is don't be afraid to cut. We had to do a cut during our development, which had us retool and rework a large portion of the current vertical slice demo. But we feel that this was good for the game's health and future, as the direction that we have now gone with is closer to the actual game design that we had from the start and fits the game closer aesthetically. And finally, what is Splinter? This and Rule 1 kind of go hand in hand, as we started to learn the true identity of Splinter as we went through development, and as it grows from the initial pitch to what it will eventually be in August. We have learned that Splinter is an action combat game with combat first and environment second. Now, let's talk about producer stuff. All my project managers, you'll love this. First, let's talk about our meetings. With our meetings, they were quite high in Sprint 1. Pretty expected. We needed to meet with the team, design out the game, come up with our milestones for vertical slice, so on and so forth. Now my goal from the first sprint was to cut down meeting times by half, which we successfully, press the wrong button, which we successfully didn't do. Now why did this happen? You know? And if anyone was at our last status update, you probably know why. The grapple is a culprit. Well, after we cut the grapple, we had to meet as a team, come together, and come out and design an alternative, which, as I detailed before during our presentation, was much healthier for the game as we go forward. Now, successfully, for the next 2 sprints, we did cut down meeting times by over half. So we were quite excited about this. Now let's talk about team capacity and milestones. We began our development on January 12th, and our alpha content lock date is June 29th. That is about 24 weeks of development for 16 devs, minus me and Shay, for 15 hours a week. That comes out to a total capacity cap of 5,760 hours. We have now used about 1,550 hours to get to this point right now. This is the breakdown per department. Thanks, Splinter. As you can see, our programming department is much smaller than the design and art. There are only 3 people. So this is pretty on target for adding up to the 15 and 50, and we're still on target to deliver everything that we want at the end of content lock, which I will detail now. So I'll put this up into a meter to make it more digestible as we detail different milestones that encompass the collaboration of all 3 departments. First thing we need done is the first 3 weapons. So to start, let's fill the meter with what we already did. We first need first 3 weapons, which will take us to about 2,100 hours. 3 complete levels. Based on our velocity for how we are handling the Sanctum and our plans going forward, it should take us to about the 3,000 hour mark. With 2 more completed enemies, will take us just under the 4,000 hour mark, based on our velocity with how we developed the husk, both in design and in art. An intro sequence, which will be 2D stills, which we are estimating to take us just up to the 4,000 hour mark. And 50 more animations and 80 more environmental assets based on the velocity of both asset pack implementation, mocap cleanup, keyframe animation, as well as the 3 departments of velocity for making environmental assets, decals, and VFX. This will take us to just under 5,000, just below our 20% contingency. This will be used as a rainy day fund of ours for when stuff needs to go back into the oven to be cooked for longer, or if we have to rework some other tasks and put them right back onto the stovetop. Kitchen analogies today. These are our rough milestones, big ticket options, from now until June. I want to highlight the first one as a part of March, team restructuring. Now that seems like a very scary bullet point. What I mean by this is I will be taking everything we have learned as a team and myself as a project lead for the first 6 weeks of development and retooling some of our processes and pipelines to make development more efficient and less of a general headache. With that, all these milestones are dependent on this first part. So it's a little difficult for us to get a little granular into the weeds at the moment. But this is the big ticket options that we need to hit month by month if we want to be able to hit the targets that we want. We also want to detail that focus group testing is very frequent. It happens every 2 weeks at the end of our 2-week sprints. We are using this to make sure that we can be constantly iterating on what we have, because a lot of our weapons are going to need a lot of iteration and a lot of tuning and a lot of testing. So at the end of content lock on June 29th, all we have to do is polish it up for the entirety of July and make this game a fun and fast combat-first experience. Now before I leave you today, I want to talk about some risks with the project. And there's 3 that I want to detail that we're thinking about. First is the level size. As you saw from the demo, that's not even the entirety of the Sanctum that we showed off today. So it's a very big level. This runs the risk of overscoping our art targets and being able to art out the entire space. This also means that bigger levels means longer iteration. Having to cut it up into different sections, longer playtest times, overall takes longer. As well as is also dependent on the mechanics of the weapons, which are being developed in tandem, which also plays into the iteration. Now, based on the lessons that we've learned and the velocity that we have of our level designers, we're going to put up what I like to call the how scared am I meter. So, all the way on the left is we're pretty good, and we're starting to teeter towards the red is when we should start getting a little nervous. Now with this, I'm not that scared of it. Neither is the team. It's something that we're still thinking about, keeping an eye on, and our advantage of cutting our levels up into sections is that we can cut section by section, rather than cutting level by level, to make them smaller play times, smaller critical paths, so we can make our targets more dense if we need be. But the next one being the 3 weapons problem. With 3 weapons, it's a pretty large scope for the actual combat target of the game. It runs the risk of not having enough time to iterate on all 3. It also means we have a question to answer. Do we want a single polished weapon throughout the entire game? Or do we run the risk of having 3 semi-polished ones throughout the whole game? It can cause all of them to be half-baked if not handled properly. Now, bringing up the how scared am I meter once again. I am a little concerned about this, so we will be visiting this problem post-vertical slice, seeing what we can do to still deliver on something like this experience while also staying in scope. Right now, we are able to stay in scope with what we are detailing with velocity and capacity, but we're starting to come up really close to the 20% mark. So I'd like to visit it and see if we can come up with any alternatives to try and bring down the scope a little bit. The last one I'll leave you with today, which is more of a positive one, is robes on future enemies. Our enemies are cultists. Cultists wear a lot of robes and a lot of flowy clothing. This can become very inflated assets. It's a lot of cloth, a lot of simulation. We have to figure out how we're going to be able to sell that without looking too strange. When we have a lot of them on screen, if we don't handle them properly, they can become a performance issue with a lot of enemies on screen. We're not planning on having more enemies more than 6 or 8 on the screen, but still, with a lot of simulated cloth, that can become a performance issue. And it's also harder to convey the cult aesthetic and design without really robes to use for the religious iconography already. But talking with the art department and coming up with different ways we can accomplish this effect with the tech artists, I'm not super worried about it, but it is a risk that I'm keeping my eye on if we do have to cut and pivot and figure out different ways to really sell the cultist aesthetic. And with that, thank you for listening, and now let's Splinter's vertical slice.
We only got about 11 minutes. So normally the ones who give us the most feedback are Ron and Nick, so I'm going to split that up between the 2 of them. Ron, you've got until 3:40.
Okay, great.
The rest of us will just give you written feedback.
Sounds good?
Okay, how y'all doing?
Good.
I'm going to go fast, okay?
A lot better now that we've gone through this now.
I have some questions later about the integration of the multiplayer character, which I'll probably discuss later for Steve when you point. Why did the spear clip into the ground? Don't answer that. Just note that I noticed. I like the idea of the swap attack a lot. You know, just switching weapons as we do, but there's a whole attack about that. So maybe I want to plan that and do that with an enemy. That's really, really cool. And I think there's some nice synergies of switching and transitioning. I think that's great. I love the visual target a lot. And there's a great creepy, icky feel of being on the internals of that Vastmore. You all are doing a great job with that, and it looks really, really cool. Integrate better with gameplay, right? Some of the encounters that you were doing with enemies could have taken place in that area so that you'd have an actual full minute of gameplay that looks cool and visually, but also from an experience side.
Yep.
As it is, these are completely separate. So like, okay, how much more time before we see like a minute of gameplay, right? And so this is the problem with the separated visual targeting gameplay target. It's not what we would properly call a vertical slice, and you want to aim to try to integrate those things better with each other. I'm perfectly fine with an extra area of more gameplay that's like blockout, but doesn't look pretty, like extra LD. Great, but you want a good solid section where everything there looks good, right? That's the vertical slice part of it. The music was great. Play it in the game, even to draw our attention to it. I know you're trying to really showcase it by having us sit there and just listen to it on PowerPoint, but I don't think it plays well in a presentation to kind of stop the presentation just to listen. I think you want to still give that in game, or at least while you're showing the visual target shots, you can play music there as well.
Sure.
Cool indentation underfoot, cut the radius in half. The line of dialogue was written 3 times longer than it needed to be. the delivery from the actor was probably 4 times longer than it needed to be, and it was twice as melodramatic than I think it needed to be, and it was exacerbated by the captioning underneath, where I've already read what you said, but it's going to take me another 15 seconds to hear you say it, but I already know what you said.
Right.
So that whole thing was kind of, that part didn't work. The run cycle is clearly built with the spear in hand, so before I get the spear, make sure that you still rotate that right arm as it runs, because it just looks weird to have it kind of be back there. But I knew it was because the spear was coming. The flying away of the enemy doesn't seem to match the animation's intensity or the game feel. It's not really earned. It's just like, oh wow, that guy went flying. Really make it feel like you did that, right?
Yep.
There's a couple of odd sound effects in the battle sequence that was a little bit weird. I'm not sure what that was coming from, but it didn't sound like any bones or sinews of the enemy being broken or anything. It sounded kind of gamey. I don't know, we're kind of early on, but just some little feedback on the sound effect there. An impressive amount of variety of abilities that you already have in, and they are well animated too. So that is one of the biggest achievements of this game. And it's so hard to do that well at all, much less for vertical slice just in 2 months. So I'm extremely impressed by your combat gameplay. And I know just by seeing that up there, y'all can cook, y'all can move, I'm confident in your team just because of that. So that is probably my greatest compliment of the game, and I'm so excited by that part of it. It's really, really cool. The UI was really cool artistically, but it takes up way too much real estate. It was wise to think about a design king of the hill, but you don't need to be Bill militant about that, and be flexible. Maybe over time as you develop and as things move along, maybe the environment does become a bigger and more important thing in the game. Like, okay, like be prepared that you can pivot with that, that's fine. But I do think it's wise to say, okay, if we're making a decision between these two things, we've decided that combat is more important to us. Great, but just recognize that that's not necessarily a forever decision. Little to no meetings is not the goal, efficient meetings is the goal. It's easy to capture metrics on the duration of the meeting, and then we try to reduce meeting inefficiency by reducing the time of the meetings. But think about the fact that if you have a meeting that's 99% efficient, your goal is not to just cut those in half, because then you cause other problems with people doing work that's wasted because it could have been figured out better what to do if we'd spent more time talking about this. But we decided to make the meetings as short as possible so then we can create other problems later.
So I probably did not explain that very well then. They are smaller in time because they got more efficient.
Okay, great. I love the risk mitigation discussion as well. That's cool. You mentioned one about cloth dynamics. Why not just do a tech test with the cloth dynamics in there, go to the profile and do a specific trace around that function call and see exactly how many millis it takes with and without the cloth dynamics, and you've answered the question. Rather than, well, we're having discussions. No, put it in, time it with millis in the profiler, and you're good. And you'll know if it's going to work. All right, cool. That's all my feedback in 6 minutes.
Yeah,
nice work, y'all.
Really cool to see everything come together and get a good look at everything. I did have a few notes about what I was seeing as far as like the environment. I'm guessing that you're using landscape for a lot of the parts of the actual ground that you're walking on, and I'd like to take the resolution of that, and I want to up the resolution of some of those parts and pieces. I think you've got a tough sell where you've got to take some of the stuff from the landscape, you've got these extra pieces that are being inserted into the landscape, and you've got to figure out some way to skirt those meshes to make sure it doesn't have this like perfect CG edge where those two things meet, right? So there's different ways that you can go about that. You can get different like grass or like different items, and you can place those around where those items meet. There are some more advanced shader techniques that you can do to where this item that's being put into the landscape will actually give a nice soft blend between the two. But like right now in my mind, there's like this really harsh transition between the organic and then like what you guys are doing with the man-made pieces that are in there. I think you also have another challenge where you have the flesh part of things versus the man-made part of things, where you've got this intense like pink and like red and everything else, and then you got this other parts that are very dark. And so it's causing this like natural contrast between the two. And I want to figure out ways that you could blend between those and make them feel like it's been inserted in this thing, it's been living in there for a while, there's dirt that's built up around it. So you probably want to use a combination of like decals and things like that could help with that. I think the biggest tool at your disposal that you could be using right now that could hide a lot of these things is lighting. Like what I saw lighting-wise right now, it feels like it's very ambient lit at times, especially in the flesh parts where it's like it's really drawing my attention to that stuff, right? I'd like to tone back everything else. Like I'd like to get this like really moody, kind of dark, and then you're using lighting in very specific areas to highlight. Like I want you to go over here. I want you to pay attention to this thing. So I think lighting is going to be a friend of yours. I know you're still working out like the animation state machine. Me liking comic book stuff, I see these like really iconic poses at times, and the only thing I see like right now is maybe it's staying a little bit too long in some of the animations. Like I just have this thing built up in my head where this right arm is like back behind the character, and it kind of feels like it's almost dragging his arm at times. So I'm sure with time we'll get more animations kind of built up, but right now I'm seeing very specific poses that are being hit and they kind of stay quite a bit. So I'd like to see that worked on. You already pulled out the fact that you got to work on clothing, right? But until we get there, I'd like to see some just like temporary shapes on them, even if it doesn't animate the best. You know, if we've got some interpenetration with clothes and arms and stuff, that's fine. Like we can fix that later. But without the clothing, I don't get a full sense of like what the shape of those characters are and what they're going to look like on screen. So I think you need to solve that first, and then you can work on more of the technical parts of the clothing aspect, animating. And then the last part is I want you to be able to bring the world to life, right? And we kind of talk about this environmental animation. If this thing is huge, every now and then you should see like the walls kind of rumble and there should be stuff kind of falling from the ceiling. I don't get a sense yet with the atmosphere in there, like having some potential fog or fog cards that kind of draw certain areas. So I think there's tons and tons of potential. I know you're at the very beginning stages of this, but I think if we get a much more clear picture of some of this, then it's going to all start to come together. And like I said, I think in my mind, if we can solve the lighting thing, then that will be a huge win for you, and it can give you the mood and atmosphere that I'm looking for. So,
Absolutely.
thanks, sir.
Does D&D not turn on Teams?
Those are Teams messages.
That's on D&D too?
All right, thank you.
Thank you.